All right, welcome back to Space Insiders. This is our summer series. I'm Tony Sewell, and as usual, here with my mate Rob Riak. How you going, Rob?
Hey, great. Hey, everybody. How are you doing? It's great to be back.
Hope everyone's enjoying the summer. When you're listening to this, I'm going to be in an RV somewhere in the northern reaches of North Queensland in Australia. So I'm looking forward to that. What are you up to for the holidays, Rob?
That sounds about right, Tony. You're going to be hanging out, and I'm going to be at the office probably.
Oh no.
No, I got some good plans for this summer. Looking forward to going away with the family, just us, getting away from some things and relaxing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to vacation too this summer. It's going to be a good one.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Well, look, we've got another really interesting episode today. This one's going to be a little bit different to others that we've had. So we're going to be meeting with Rich Julien, who Rob and I both know, who has a really extensive background in investment, investing in startups and helping to accelerate startups. You want to tell us a little bit about it, Rob?
Yeah, Rich is a really fun person. When I first started 8 years ago in my current company, Rich was a great mentor for me. And a lot of the reasons were because he's had a deep background in defense and national security, actually working in those programs, having all the right clearances, and really being able to understand how to not only operate in those types of environments, but really understanding how influence works, especially when it comes to large mission programs in defense and national security. And at the time, also, he's had this passion for a very long time working to support startups.
Yeah.
Um, and so his background in defense national security, having worked a lot with startups and cloud computing specifically, is very technical as well. He's got a very unique set of skills in his toolbox that I think Tony and we really wanted to dig into and see how he could provide some insight for those listening, who are actually, interested in doing something similar and working, within technology that at the intersection of defense and national security. So he's recently, the last several years, been working on the investor side, which I think has been rounding out his skill set. So
Yeah.
it's going to be really fun to get to learn from him.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to touching on some subjects around sort of like how what the good and the bad that he's seen working with entrepreneurs and founders and just the, I guess, diving a little bit deeper into the process of how entrepreneurs can really get their businesses going. I know every time I got the opportunity, Rich and I sort of overlapped at AWS for a couple of years. And I know every time I got to interact with him, I always learn a lot. So it's a fascinating space. So this should be a really good interview.
It's definitely going to be one that people want to listen to. So excited to get started.
All right, let's check it out. All right, welcome back. And great to see you, Rich. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Rich. Great to see you. It's been a while.
As is always the case.
So, Rich, I guess just to set the scene and for people to learn a little bit about you. So we work together at AWS, but you've got over 30 years in the startup and investment and acceleration business. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to BOKA Capital?
I mean, it's pure serendipity and luck, right? As most things are. I joined the military right out of college. I enlisted so I could go to language school. And when I got to my first assignment, because I could spell computer, I became a computer expert. And I got assigned to a DARPA program, literally my first role in my new position. And spent the next 10 years in the military always working in DARPA and technology innovation programs. First as an enlisted guy, and then I got a commission. And once again, got sucked into DARPA programs. So I worked on advanced technology and innovation programs. And then when I decided to get out of the military, I actually got recruited by someone who had been working with me on a program, ended up going into the U.S. Intelligence community for the next 20 odd years. And I say 20 odd years because I left twice to start companies, once quite successfully, and once in 2008 that happened like most things in 2008 when I died a spectacular death. Went back into the government after that. As is typical, you get sucked back into the intelligence community or defense community. And then left that and joined AWS, where I helped stand up AWS's national security startup practice. Ran that for almost 8 years, and then left to start Boca. So, I mean, it was really just a collection of lucky breaks and serendipitous encounters that brought me to all of those roles. But they all provided me a deep background in that. So I've worked at companies, large companies, small companies, massive companies, 2 million people, AWS or Amazon. So I have this kind of breadth. And so we decided to go off and start the company. We actually did it with a couple of folks who had met us while they were doing diligence on a company I had coming through an AWS accelerator.
Oh, interesting.
And so this, again, the connection just kind of happened with that. And we decided to go forth and start this firm.
There's a very strong European connection with your company too.
Well, we built the firm very specifically. Our thesis is based around AUKUS. So national security for the US, UK, and Australia. So about a third of the company is in the UK. About a little over half the company is in the US. And then we have a partner in Sydney who manages our operations there. We're still small, but we are very much focused on the national security for the three countries because we're so tightly tied. Militarily, we're tied. In the intelligence community, we've been tied for over 50 years, deeply into it. But also our banking and finance and investment systems are all interconnected. So we bleed together, so we might as well invest together.
Awesome. I'd really like to come back to the AUKUS discussion. I didn't realize there was that AUKUS discussion because obviously as an Aussie, there's a lot of discussion going on in Australia at the moment about AUKUS and the future of Australia's defence. But anyway, Rob, I stepped on you then.
No, that's okay. Actually, I kind of feel like, maybe we should talk about that,
Yeah.
and now because, so Rich, one of the things that we are really having a fun time doing with this podcast is talk about not just startups per se, but kind of, what are the trends currently globally, especially with the U.S. rebalancing on defense globally. How does that impact not only the investment in defense in the U.S., but what does that mean for other countries? And even more specifically, as it relates to what Tony and I are trying to do here and what you focus all your time on is how do you invest in and support startups given those kind of potential new trends or changes? So, on this topic, actually, it's pretty interesting. Let's talk about AUKUS a little bit. And I think in general, I think European investment, as they're putting together their rearm strategy and looking to invest in a whole bunch of new defense tech and defense industrial based type companies and commercial companies related to them. How do you look at that now from your investor lens, and then maybe even stepping back from your current role, kind of where do you see things potentially going as it relates to innovation and the rebalancing of this area?
Clearly, I mean, the defense market and then the national security. So we define national security much more broadly, right? So it's everything that supports the national security of the country. Obviously, defense is a major player in that, but it's also supply chain, energy resilience, epidemiological challenges, right? I think COVID taught us that, right? So anything that you have to pay attention to, and obviously those are absolutely key for Europe, which has very little in region energy, right? They're importing it all. So supply chain and energy resilience is huge. Look what happened to them after the drop of Russian oil and natural gas. So we do see a huge growth in that. We spent a lot of time when I was at AWS really focused on Europe and growth of the NATO Innovation Fund and NATO Diana. But as an investor, to me, the US and the UK have such closely tied investment communities, both LPs who invest in VCs and also VCs who invest. Our banking systems are very closely intertwined. The U.S. has been the traditional market where UK and Australian money flows to if it's flowing out of the country. And, we do have President Trump. He doesn't like translators and we all speak English, mostly. right? So there is a natural affinity for that, but Europe is a huge growth potential there. There's so many great startup incubation systems. Finland and Sweden, two huge examples of that. But Germany is really trying to push and grow in that area. The Czechs do phenomenal startups too, much smaller market sizes. But in the end, when you look at defense, so many of them have to see the expansion market is the US. Because while Europe is trying to operate as a whole, it still has a sovereign mindset, right? French want to invest in French companies. German want to invest in German companies. They'll let outside money come, but it's much more difficult. They don't have kind of the open flow. And with the changes to the import-export and to the things like ITAR that the U.S. government put in place for AUKUS last year, it really opened up the aperture wider for a broader investment between the U.S., UK, and Australia. So while I see Europe as interesting, it has a lot of challenges with the sovereign. And to be blunt, the EU and GDPR are challenging.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
one of you mentioned that one of the key aims of AUKUS was to promote exchange both ways between US and the Australia, UK, and back the other way. And I think one of the concerns, just thinking about the space industry in Australia, have still kind of felt like it's still a bit sort of one way. How do you see this kind of evolving going forward? Because I know it's been challenging the last couple of years with Australian government policy around the government investment in space, space capability, and it seems like a lot of these major programs are still getting awarded to the big sort of US companies that have a big investment and big presence in Australia. But how do you see AUKUS helping to provide opportunity for startups in space technologies in Australia or the UK, in the US?
So I think the most important one was the changes to the import-export controls and some of the other restrictions. It will allow Australian companies or UK companies to do business with the US defense and government, the US government writ large, but mostly focused on US defense, and sell into that by remaining as an Australian company or a UK company. In the previous and for many other countries around the world, you have to establish a US entity. That US entity has to do all the work with the Defense Department. The challenge for smaller markets like Australia and even like the UK is that the US market, being so much larger, very quickly becomes the base of the company, and the company shifts and becomes a US company. And that's what they're trying to avoid. So they establish this ability for the companies to do business but still remain a sovereign capability and do production there. I think the other thing that's important to note, while AUKUS Pillar 1 was about the submarines, and Pillar 2 is about technology, including very specifically space, the reality is the submarine capabilities were not ready to go into Australia until they completely rebuilt the industrial base that can support military bases. That same industrial base that can support military manufacturing is the exact same kinds of technologies and capabilities the space industry needs if you're going to build rockets and satellite buses. Software obviously is a different animal, but if you need that same precision manufacturing capability, you need that same support capacity, you need that ability to do refining of materials on site. That capability, Australia will be building up to establish and support the bases. Once it's there, now suddenly it can be used for other markets and industries. I think there'll be a direct knock-on to the space industry that will benefit from that. It may not be, in the very near future, but over time, you're going to see a huge benefit to specialized industrial production, which is outside the US is relatively minimal.
That's a really good point. Yeah,
Yeah, we didn't really clarify what AUKUS is. So could we actually, obviously I hear about it all the time, but just for the listeners, is an international treaty, like what exactly is it? I thought it was, but I just,
It is
what
an
truly
international
encompasses
treaty
it?
signed by President Biden and the two prime ministers, and ratified by Congress. And they put some special changes into import-export laws and other stuff with that. It very specifically calls out national security, defense in particular, for the US, UK, and Australia, hence AUKUS. It is an extension of the intelligence community called Five Eyes that we've had for many years, which very specifically allowed a lot of coordination, collaboration, and co-design development and deployment in the intelligence community, but not so much in the defense community. We've had a defense relationship with Canada, thanks to NORAD, for 60 some years now. And this really just kind of extends that bubble to include the Aussies and the UK. New Zealand's not called out in it, but New Zealand is much more minimally participating in the defense side of it. They do share a lot still in the national security.
Got it. No, thanks for that, Rich. So who governs it? I mean, like, how does that work actually? Like, is there anyone governing this? I mean, if you have
No,
these
there's
collaborations,
not.
how do you incentivize a collaboration between them? And like, how does that work?
There's there's a myriad of ways of incentivizing it. There's the financial, by being able to do after defense and national security contracts between the countries, as well as commercial potential for those. Because look, all three of our countries have a very specific mindset of dual use technologies. They want capabilities that can support national security, but also have commercial viability. So because of that, anything that we do in this realm will have a knock-on effect commercially, and vice versa. The commercial development will have a knock-on in the national security community. We are the closest of allies. If a U.S. soldier has deployed into a combat zone in the last 50 years, they've probably done it with a Brit and an Aussie alongside them. So it's just kind of recognizing those deep ties that we have and saying, look, in the changing world threat environment, we will continue to be the closest of allies. This is, we all see ourselves as coordinated. The U.S. and the U.K., I mean, despite the fact that we separated from them, we've had a long and established relationship. And in the Indo-Pacific, we have no better ally than the Aussies. The Japanese are great partners, but Australia has been our closest ally since prior to World War I.
Yeah. So if I'm a startup founder and I'm, I'm building and trying to sell something, a capability that could apply across the board to Australia, UK, New Zealand, and the U.S. government around some defense application, whatever that might be, then this is actually a really good thing to think about, right? And maybe it's more than just the U.S. as a customer, but there are some international allies that could also use my capability if I were to kind of think through kind of a sales and account plan for my business. Is that true?
It makes it easier to open up those next markets, right? If you're looking at the U.S. as a growth market, if you're looking at the U.K., and the U.K. and Australia have the space bridge, right? So they've already agreed to share space technologies between the two countries. The U.S. in Pillar 2 of AUKUS is getting involved in that as well. And so it allows you to open that market more easily. Still not easy, right? But it allows you to more easily enter that market because it reduces some of the barriers to entry.
Yeah, cool. Well, maybe let's perhaps zoom in a little bit and have a little bit of talk about the types of companies you work with and I guess the journey of founders. So, I mean, just to set the table, I mean, what sort of startups does Boca like to back, and to you, like, what makes these businesses or founders stand out as you're thinking about where you're going to invest?
Yeah, sure. So we're a growth stage investor. And we target growth stage specifically because we saw a lot of really solid early stage investors in the national security market, but not a lot in this middle stage. And then when you get to the later stage, there are only a few handfuls of people who write, $200, $300 million checks, right? But we were targeting that kind of mid-market area. And rather than saying round, because I know a company that raised a $600 million seed round, we're really targeting those checks between 10 and $100 million, right? So the first real size checks that people go after. So typically a company's second or third fundraising, depending if they did friends and families or whatever they've done. But this is the first time a company is usually going out for, I'll call it real money, right? The first time they're going out for a big chunk of change there. So we're looking for companies that already have an established product and at least their first set of customers and going into it. And established product doesn't mean a full-featured, commercially shrink-wrapped product, but it means you're past the proof of concept stage, right? You've got a product that can be brought into the market. And the reason we target that is I can't take something to a national security customer that can't be assessed, evaluated, right? So you have to be at least the stage where you can hand over.
Do you think that's changing at all, though, Rich?
It depends. If you're in the software world, the pace of change goes so much faster, right? I can go from design to fully featured product in a couple of months. We kind of target that nexus between hardware and software, everything in the autonomy world, but things that require kind of that interface point, because that's what the national security community is really looking for. So that means that it takes a little bit longer to go through that. There's more things you have to verify and validate. And from a development perspective and getting in your pipeline for delivery, you now have to hit stages where, hey, I have to go build a bigger production facility and then a full production facility and then a scaled production facility or into multiple facilities. So that's really, we try to help companies when they're raising the money to go do that. I have my initial production line. I can make ones and twos a month, ones and twos a quarter. I need to raise money so I can make 10 a month, 20 a month, whatever that number is that they're trying to do. That first point where they're like, now I've got customers, how do I deliver at speed?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think, we're Tony and I talk about how interested we are in this space because I think, there's such a heightened interest in defense tech and, you still hear a lot about DIU. Frankly, I think there's a lot of traditional contracts or recompetes. We're seeing that now we're actually being shifted to OTAs, with the new administration. I think there's a lot of talk based on those interests from the White House. You see a lot of public discussions with the CEOs of Raytheon and Lockheed and all the defense industrial base talking about the government really does need to access commercial dual use. We're okay with that, and we want to partner with them. So I feel like, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like this is like the height of that discussion right now. And so it's one of those things
all you
where
have to do is look at how many of those companies, the traditional players, have started their own venture organizations, not their corporate development side to acquire companies, but to invest in companies of technologies that they know they're going to use.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's actually interesting. I attended the Paris Air Show recently, and I will say I don't think I've ever seen so many defense tech and space startups in any one particular place. It was incredible how many there were. And it also was it was incredible to meet up with some of those corporate venture groups that you actually are talking about, And I met with one individual who is specifically focused on space and cyber, specifically for a very large defense contractor. And a lot of it is, to your point, I think it's tech scouting, learning about the market, seeing where they can partner and sub on contracts, but potentially even make some return. But I think it's actually the first two reasons that they're most interested in those companies. Yeah.
How are you identifying like the companies that you're investing in, Rich?
So I like to use the Amazon answer for all of these things. It depends.
Sounds about
obviously, right. A lot of it comes through the network of that I have, that people that I've known. A lot of companies I met and got to know when they were early in their life while I was still at AWS. I ran AWS accelerators, and we had some incredible companies come through that. I work and serve as a mentor on multiple accelerators. Again, it's just a great way to connect to the companies. Not only the companies that come in the accelerator, but those that come in pitch to be included in an accelerator. And then, a lot of this is about who you know. And so I mentioned those earlier stage investors, and there's some great companies out there. And when they're investing in the early stage, they're looking for the kind of that, where do I go next? And that's when they can reach out to me about companies in their portfolio. And in return, when I see a company that's really cool, has great capability, but it's too early for me, I pass those back down to the companies I work with that are venture in the earlier stages.
Right.
So it's more of a coalition of the willing. And because of that, they bring stuff to you and you bring stuff to them.
Yeah. Okay. So what are as you're interacting with these companies, and maybe you decide to invest in them, or you pass them on to perhaps a different type of investor. What are some of the things that first time founders often get wrong when they're thinking about fundraising?
In my mind, there's two major mistakes that founders make, and this goes for any size of raise that you're doing out here. It's a relationship game. You have to build that relationship with investors and potential investors over time, right? You have to have multiple connections with them. If it's the first time you're going and talking to somebody and you're in the middle of a raise, the chances of you being able to close that deal are very small. You are behind the eight ball. And so that they're forgetting that it is that relationship game. It's almost like establishing a partnership between organizations. You can't do it just because you need one right now. You've got to start building that up front. And even when you're not ready to raise, you should be out there talking to people, getting to know people, find out who the people that are potentially you could get in there. And that's what I see a major mistake, right? They're not starting that process until they're ready to raise money or they need money. That's the worst place to be in. I need money and I have to raise. Now I'm in trouble. And the corollary to that is it's not static, right? Every time you go out, every time you change the amount you're raising out there, you're talking to a different set of investors. The investors who write sub-$1 million checks, the investors who write the $1 to $10 million checks, and the investors who write the 10 to 100 checks, and the investors who write bigger than that are all different, right? And it's rare to see an investor that crosses all of those stages because there's too much breadth there. So you constantly are having to introduce yourself to a new collection of folks that are out there. The good news for the companies that are doing this is you have a great resource, right? Once you take investment from somebody, it's worth it to them to see you succeed. So they can become your network to help you find who are those next people to work with. Because your investor wants to work with other investors that they trust or have established relationships with. So that's another area where I don't think enough companies take advantage of the investors who've already invested in them. They want to see you succeed. So go to them, talk to them, leverage them. And then the final kind of small one, because I've been doing this with one of my current portfolio companies, is, hey, if investors in you, they've got other companies, right, that they're investing in too. What a great chance to establish potential partners, potential customers, or just learn and grow from each other. So take the time to not only get to know your investor, but who else are they investing in? It's a great introduction to it.
Yeah, one thing we talk about, we've talked about a lot is from the eyes of the founder or the CEO of a startup. But what do you recommend to people that have had a long history, a long professional history that actually want to get into the startup game, and might want to work for one of these companies? How do you if you're one of those people, how do you actually find that opportunity? Is it similar? I mean, do you do you try to build relationships with the investors directly? How do you do something like that, Rich? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that would love to work for some of these super cool, innovative companies, and they have a lot of experience that they might want to bring to that company. What do you recommend to those folks?
Look, when you talk to a startup founder at whatever scale, you could talk to Palmer over at Anduril, or you could talk to a founder with 5 people in it. The 3 big challenges you have as a founder is capital, customers, and talent, right? So the hardest thing to scale is your talent, right? So they're always looking for good people. If you're bringing knowledge and expertise that will help them more easily penetrate the market they're already targeting, or even better, help them open up that next market, that next revenue stream. That knowledge and expertise that you bring is gold to those companies. More often than not, they don't know it. They need you to help them with that. They need you to help them identify, hey, you don't want to go in here, or targeting, right? So I always give this example, and for space companies, NGA is kind of that big, hairy thing. I want to work with NGA. You don't work with NGA, right? You work with a piece or part within NGA. There's a segment within that you have to target into that. And that's where, if you're a person that's come out of NGA or have deep expertise with that, help them identify, oh, that's not really the group you want to talk to. This is the group you want to talk to. They've got the contracts. Oh, by the way, I have the contacts there. That's the expertise and that knowledge bubble and contacts that you can bring into it. And those companies are looking for it too. And also, I think that don't sell yourself short with the companies. Understand when you're going into it, what they do and how you can help them achieve, and go in and say, this is how I go about doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Robert, reminds me of a couple of customers we worked on together where they were just like, we want to sell to the Air Force. Well, okay, Air Force is a big organization. Like, what do you actually want to do with them? Like, it's
exactly.
Helping them focus. Yeah, right. Cool. Well, Rich, this has been a really interesting discussion, and I mentioned in the intro that whenever I get to sit down with you and have a chat about these things, I always learn a lot. This has been really helpful for me, and hopefully for our listeners as well. One thing we like to do when we finish up our interviews is ask kind of an unrelated sort of question to what your day job is, and just to learn a little bit about you and sort of what makes you tick. So one of the questions I've got for you is, if money and educational experience was no object, what would you love to be doing to make a living?
I'd love to be teaching history.
Yeah, right. What?
There's no money to be made in teaching.
No,
but I'm a die-hard historian. I love and continue to read and study in that. But if I could do that, I'd love to teach. In particular, I'd love to try to teach that to high school level students, to try to get them to realize that history is not a dead subject. If you want to understand what's going on in Iran today, you better know how we got here.
Yeah. Is there any particular topic within history that you gravitate most towards?
I've always had a kind of a focus on kind of the conflict, and which is the life of Central Europe. It's been something my degrees are in, and so it's always been something I've been very interested in.
Do you have any books that you recommend that we read?
Well, I have so many books. It really depends on the topics that people want to cover into it. But in particular, Barbara Tuchman's Guns of August explains World War I, why it came about, better than anything I've ever read before. It's different, but she writes beautifully, and it's a topic that continues to affect us today. Central Europe is the way it is. Turkey and the Middle East are the way they are because of what happened in World War I.
Well, that sounds interesting. That does sound
I've heard of that book.
Well, Rich, I would say, having worked with you, you'd be an excellent teacher. You're a great mentor to me when we work together. You always made me feel comfortable, not only within the company for which we worked, but also just, within the startup stuff. We had a lot of fun together, but we had a lot of respect for you. So it's really been a pleasure talking to you today, and just really appreciate the time you've spent. And we wish you the best of luck in what you do. Keep in touch.
Yeah, love it. And maybe next time Tony and I can talk about the subject near and dear to our heart, partnerships.
Yes, for sure. Good stuff. Well, thanks again, Rich. And for our audience, if they would like to get in touch with you or Boca, where can they find you?
Honestly, the best way to find me and connect to me is through LinkedIn. I'm very active on it, and I track whatever's coming through on LinkedIn.
Very good. All right, we'll make sure we post the link in the show notes. And to our audience, thanks for joining us for our summer series. This was our second one. Rob and I'll be back in a couple of weeks talking about the news and with a brand new guest. But please remember, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please rate and review. It would really help us spread the word and tell a friend about the podcast. And if you've got any ideas too, we'd love to hear from you. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Stay cool out there.